Let us start learning reptiles this week. There's only 18 of them, so it's not too bad. These are the only scientific names you need to know besides the bird orders for the next test. So this shouldn't be horrible, I promise. We've only got 3 turtles that I'm asking you to know. There's so many more, but I think these are 3 good representative ones, and you probably know them already. You just don't know how to distinguish them. So the first one is our common snapping turtle, or you can just call it the snapping turtle. A lot of times it's called common because the alligator snapping turtle is found further south of here. And it's much bigger. But this guy kind of is in a league of his own because he's massive. I mean, look at those legs. They look like elephant legs. All right, so they're very different compared to everything else. Their scientific name is Chelydra serpentina, and the serpentine or snake-like aspect of it is apparently due to their tail because it's supposed to be long and serpentine, long and snake-like. It's a much longer tail than other native turtles that we'll see. They do have that very strong, almost hooked jaw, and there are 2 aspects of their shells that are different. Just so you know, so there's 2 shells that every turtle has. The carapace is the main one on their back, which we usually see, and the plastron is the one on their ventral side. So generally, a carapace on a turtle is going to be sort of circular, right? All right. But on snapping turtles, it looks a little different. It kind of looks like a ghost. If I were to give it little eyes, you would see a little ghost there. Sure, why not? So they have that jagged edging towards the posterior end. And you can see that in the picture on the bottom. Okay, so that's one thing that's unique. Generally, with the plastron, they have just a little bit of room to kind of move their arms and legs. And if I kind of draw a typical plastron, it looks maybe like that, where the legs would be coming out of here. So they give a lot of protection. Okay. But with the snapping turtle, it's super duper thin and it almost looks like a cross. So my picture is not great, but it clearly shows that it's just a little cross, and it's because it makes room for their massive legs that are, like I said, like elephant legs. Because if they tried to fit into a plastron that was any wider, they wouldn't be able to move them very well. Okay, so that's what's 2 things that are unique about our snapping turtles is the jagged carapace, that's their back shell, and the plastron that is like a cross shaped rather than being a thicker plate of scutes. Okay, so they are made up of these different plates called scutes. So anyway, there you go. Let's see if I can get to the next page here. They can be pretty big. They can weigh over 50 pounds, so pretty impressive. If you get close to them, they can be aggressive. So stay away from them. Don't stick your finger by their mouths. There always is that kind of old wives' tale where they have the ability to break off a finger. And that's kind of under contention right now, but they can bite really, really hard. Okay. So I mentioned a couple of these things. They'll eat anything. They're usually under the water. And we'll talk about some of their adaptations later, like they can breathe through their cloaca to survive not having to come up for air constantly. But they'll eat anything. They're a sit and wait predator. They'll eat whatever comes to them. So if, a duckling or a duck comes close to them, they can grab it and yank it down to the water with them. But they'll also eat invertebrates when they're smaller. So they're kind of omnivores. Whatever comes their way, they can eat. Other fish, that kind of stuff. Other turtles, maybe? I'm not sure. Anyway, so I already talked about their carapace that has the jagged or serrations on it. The serpentina comes from the tail. okay? And the plastron is cross-shaped, okay? And they're going to be just about anywhere that there is permanent water. Now, occasionally they get stuck in areas where the water is not permanent. If they can live in a muddy area and just kind of hunker down for a month or two, they're actually okay with that because they can go into like this tiny little hibernation called brumation, which is what ectotherms do. But if it stays dry longer than that, they're going to take a hike and try and go find another pond to live in. Okay, so you will see them moving from time to time. So Chelydra serpentina. Our next one, little waving guy, is our painted turtle. And this is my example non-snapping aquatic turtle. So they tend to be very colorful. They tend not to have the serrations or anything like that. You can see the underside of them is a mixture of reds and yellows and oranges and all that kind of stuff. Males are going to have actually elongated front claws for like mating rituals with the females. He'll kind of bat her face with his long fingernails, and apparently that works for the females. So sometimes you can differentiate males from females that way. Males tend to also be smaller than females for what it's worth. Chrysemys picta is the scientific name for this one, and there are a lot of other turtles out there, but I'm going to keep it nice and simple and just focus on what we have here. So their carapace is smooth and they've got maybe stripes on them, a little bit of red, a little bit of yellow. One thing that is unique about them is they're supposed to have a yellow spot directly behind each eye. They don't have any huge red splotches because red-eared sliders have those. You know, they're pretty standard fish. Pretty standard turtles. And if you're finding things that are basking maybe on the Little River or the New River, it's often painted turtles that do this. Anything that's slow moving that has a couple of floating logs, that's where they're going to be. So this is Chrysemys picta, painted turtle. Our terrestrial turtle that we're going to focus on is our box turtle, eastern box turtle. And they're going to have a very highly domed shape of their entire body, their carapace, instead of being flat. Okay, so if you compare it to this, look how flat that is. It's so they can swim faster. Okay, so they can be aerodynamic with that. If you are not a swimmer like this guy, you can, have a much higher domed house. The amount of yellow and orange and black on them varies considerably from individual to individual. You can also tell males from females. Males actually have a red eye and females will have brown eyes. Okay. But other than that, lots of variation in patterns. So a lot of times if you take pictures, you can differentiate individuals from one another. Okay, so focus on the dome shape. They're always going to be terrestrial. So if you ever save an eastern box turtle, please don't put it near water. They don't need that. Okay, they can get everything that they need from their terrestrial habitats. Okay, so pretty straightforward with that. All right, moving on to some snakes. And I think the most number of species we have are snakes. I think I have you learning like 8 or 9 of them. And again, we're not even touching the surface of how many snake species are out there, but I'm at least going to teach you the 3 venomous ones that are in Virginia and a couple of the really common ones. I would love to spend more time telling you about more of the snake species because we actually have a pretty awesome collection. Anyway, the first one, we have a lot of species that are called black snakes, but they actually consist of maybe 6 different species. So that's why we don't have any species that are simply called black snakes as their common name anymore. It's because there are too many different species that have morphs that happen to be black, and there's different ways for us to differentiate them. This first one is called the northern black racer. So 3 words. This one can sometimes be confused with our eastern rat snake, which used to be called the black rat snake. So they're similar in that they both have juveniles with a pattern like what you see below. And juveniles tend to be patterned because the camouflage benefits them when they are young. There's a bunch of snakes that look like this essentially when they're young. Eastern rat snakes, the racers do, milk snakes, water snakes, they all have this pattern when they are young that does not match any patterns when they are older. If that's useful or not. Okay. But this is a black racer. What differentiates it is it's got very smooth scales. Okay. One of the things that I've introduced a couple times, either in lab or in lecture, is the word keeled. Okay. And remember, if something has a keel, it means it comes to a point. So instead of being, let's see, kind of has like a little mountain to it. Okay. So if each scale has comes to a little point, it is keeled. And some things can be strongly keeled where it's really pointy. Others are considered weakly keeled. So it's kind of lame. It's a little mountain, and others are not keeled at all. So if you run your finger down the snake, like we would do with any snake, right? It would feel real soft and kind of shiny. Not that shiny is a feeling, but it would look shiny and it would be smooth, right? So that is what we see with black racers. A couple other things, and I think I made an extra slide just for this to point out some real clear differentiations. Number one is whether you've got an adult or a juvenile, they actually have kind of a ridge to their eye sockets. So look above their eye sockets in this picture, and you can see its ridge, kind of like the Ferengi from Star Trek. I know that's really putting myself in a box here, but look for that ridge. That kind of helps them stand out. No matter how you're looking at them, they don't look like they've got a real flat head. It definitely looks like an uneven head when you're looking at them. And that'll show up in the specimen too, is that it's not going to be a completely flat shaped head. The other thing is that they have underbelly that is like a solid color, grays or whites, kind of a lighter solid color, no blotching or anything. And then the juveniles have really big eyes. Like, look at that picture below. Does that not stand out as a juvenile having ridiculously large eyes that don't really fit its body? By the time they get to an adult stage, like the picture on the left, it looks pretty normal. But that's kind of one thing that really stands out to me is they've got these huge bug eyes. So black racers have a ridge, racers have a ridge. I don't know if that helps. And the juvies have big old bug eyes that really look too big for their body. So here's the picture. You can see that the juvies can have kind of differences in what color their blotching is, but they're always going to have the big eyes relative to the size of their head. And they're always going to have the blotching when they're young in some way, shape, or form to provide that sort of safety net for them. Okay. The scientific name for them is Coluber constrictor. They can get up to 6 feet. They tend to be more aggressive. I hate to say that snakes are aggressive. It's not like they're going to go and chase you, but these ones are more likely to hold their ground if they feel threatened. Other snakes are going to run the other way. Okay, so things to look for, and I think I've covered all of this already. The scales are smooth because they're not keeled. Look for that brow ridge, especially in the adults. It's very obvious. There's no pattern or any coloration or blotching on their belly. All right, the chin, I think, can be modeled, but I don't really focus on that one. The juveniles do not have that solid black. They've got a red or a brown or almost even a grayish blocky pattern. as do many other juveniles, but their eyes look huge compared to any of the other juveniles. And they're here. Maybe not as common as our rat snakes. Rat snakes tend to hang around barns and human habitation more than the racers do. But racers are going to be in more rural areas and rocky areas and meadows and things like that. But yeah, that's where they're at. All right, we've got a tiny little guy, which is a northern ringneck snake. And the name kind of says it all. Look at the ring around their neck. All right, so they've got they can be maybe a foot long. I used to have a bunch of babies that hatched out in my basement in Salem. Turns out that mice, I lived in a rural area, chewed a hole about yay big through the side of our home, through some of our insulation. And both mice and these guys were coming into our basement and, hatching out or being born. Or we got adults, we got juveniles. There were so many of these things. So they are around human habitation quite a bit. They have no problem being around humans at all. I've got some in my yard right now. I move over some brush piles and there they are. They're harmless. They mostly eat slugs. So they're useful to have around and, have no negative impact on us. Just look for the solid black body with the ring around the neck. They also in real life do have very brightly colored bellies. It's either going to be red, yellow, or orange like you are seeing there. Okay, so northern ringneck snakes, Diodophis punctatus. Like I said, they're small. I've never seen one that's 20 inches long. It's usually less than a foot. And the babies, I would say, are 4 to 5 inches, like maybe a pencil or something. And that's about it. So look for that ring around the collar. That's why they're called ringneck snakes. Okay. So they prefer forested areas. They like lots of cover. And apparently they like my basement a lot. Okay. When you do pick them up, they can release a lovely musk that makes your hands smell awesome. Okay. So wash your hands really well. And it's better to be picking these things up with gloves anyway, rather than bare hands. Especially if you don't know what they are, don't pick them up. Okay. That's just safer. Take a picture, admire from a distance of any snake. All right, our next one is what used to be called the black rat snake. It's the one that most people are familiar with, and it is the one that hangs around quite a bit on barns and any type of agricultural areas. They'll hang out around people's sheds too in suburban areas. They can be up to 6 feet long. I've seen them trying to sun themselves across the hiking path of the Cascades on rainy days. They failed miserably with that because it was awfully cold and I got to pick them up. This thing was like 5 feet long. It was awesome. So this one can sometimes be confused with the black racer, but there's a couple differences there. Number one, in the juveniles, remember they have that pattern because it's for camouflage. Look at the size of the eyes compared to the black racers. They're normal size. They're tiny. Okay. So that kind of, and there's no ridge line or anything like that. These guys have a pretty standard snake head. Okay. No ridges, no oversized eyes or anything like that. The other thing with the adults is a lot of times you can still see their original pattern kind of in the background. Okay, with the black racer, it's very clear that it's solid black by the time it reaches adulthood. But these guys, if you look closely, you can see that it still has remnants of its pattern. And then the underside has blotching and half moons and things like that that also make it stand out. And I added some more pictures just for this talk to show you that. Look at the size of the eyes of the young there. The young also will have a stripe going across their eyes, kind of a raccoon stripe that will connect that, and the racer will not have that, if that's useful. There's a lot of other juvenile snakes that look like this, and the arrows are pointing to different aspects, like how to tell them apart from milk snakes and things like that. I will not overwhelm you with that information. But what they do have is that sort of black coloration, but they also have the keels. They called this weakly keeled, but if you run your hand down it, you can definitely feel it. Okay, so with the racer, it was smooth. With these guys, you can even see the keels, how they're standing up just a little bit, and that's enough for it to stand out. And they're also missing a very prominent Ferengi ridge that the black racers have. Okay, for the Star Trek fans, you're welcome. Here's another picture just to show you what the underside looks like. Again, in the black racer, it's solid, just either silvery or white or off-white or gray. Okay, but at least in these guys, someplace along their underside, they're gonna have that blotchiness. I've also heard them described as bread loaves. I've never seen that in the wild, but I've never looked for it because I already knew what it was by that point. But they're supposed to have a very flat belly with the loaf of bread in cross section. If that helps, I'd have to check out the specimens myself to be sure. Okay, so that's the eastern rat snake. That's Pantherophis alleghaniensis. The genus and species names have changed over time, and there's still some disagreement and some overlap with what species we have here. There are some thoughts that we may have the gray rat snake. We may also have the eastern rat snake, and there's sometimes a lot of places of overlap. I'm just going to try and keep it simple and call everything that we've got around here the eastern rat snake. Now note that for a couple of these species, sometimes rat snake is considered one word and other times it's considered two. I will allow either one as long as you put the word eastern in front of it. So if you want eastern rat snake or eastern rat space snake, both are acceptable for that. And they can be pretty big. Like I said, I've seen them upwards of 6 feet. Apparently they can get to 7 feet. All right, so I think that kind of covers everything that's here. They're really good at climbing trees, actually, and they're really good at climbing like bricks. And they're the species that are going to be climbing straight up like brick facades. So like your home, where they can really kink their little body into all these little spaces and make right turns with their bodies to climb up that stuff. So that's another, if you see it out in the wild, I don't think any other snake around here that is solid black has the ability to climb up vertical walls like brick walls and stuff like that. Another cool thing that they do is that when they are threatened, they will shake their tail. So it actually sounds like a rattlesnake. They are clearly not a rattlesnake, but they are mimicking one, so things will leave them alone. Okay, this is one of my favorites. I call them hoggies, as do a lot of other people. These are eastern hognose snakes. They're the ones that can play dead, where they will flop over. If they're like looking at you like this, they'll just flop over and open up their mouth like they're dead, kind of have their tongue sticking out too, and they'll release this awful musk that makes you think that they are dead, and predators think that they are distasteful. It's kind of like the same thing that a possum does. A possum is going to play dead and release a musk and make it so the predator, even though they can get to them, they're like, boy, this is really foul. This is distasteful. I don't like it. So they're cool like that. The other cool thing is, famous last words, they don't bite. Okay, it's going to take a lot to really get a hognose in the wild to bite. The only time that you may have to be careful is if they're about to shed, their eyes get real cloudy. So you actually see gray eyes that kind of reflect back at you. And if they can't see, they're more likely to strike. But otherwise, they're going to try and get away from you. They're going to try and do their own thing. And even if you do catch them, you probably won't get bitten. They are not often kept as pets, despite that, because they eat toads. And it's hard to find and feed them live toads all the time. So make sure you know, I told you not to keep these as pets. Yeah. But southern hognose snakes, which are a different species, same genus, heterodon, are often kept as pets because they won't eat just toads. You can feed them other things like mice and stuff. Anyway, what's cool about them is they're called hognose snakes because they actually do have like an upturned nose. So it actually looks like an upturned nose, like a little hog snorting at you. Okay. They can be super colorful. They can be like that bright yellow. I've seen them in the wild with that duller, kind of weakly patterned scale coloration towards the bottom. But they can be orange. They can be reddish. There are some really, really cool colors, and they are just beautiful snakes. Okay. They're also the ones who are most often going to be flattening out their entire face. And they do that to make themselves look bigger, right? And they do that to kind of make it almost look like they've got a triangular head to convince people and other threats that maybe they're a venomous snake, because a lot of venomous snakes have triangular heads, but not everything with a triangular head is venomous. So just remember that, right? But they just try and flatten themselves out to make them look much larger, and it generally works. Okay, here's some other examples of how colorful they can be. Really pretty. That's orange. And they're always going to have that pattern to them. But really, look at that. It almost looks like, I don't know, a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle face or something with that upturned nose and the flattened out body. That really makes them look spectacular. So look for the nose. It's clearly preserved even in our specimens. So look for a specimen that has some bit of patterning or beading on it in some way, shape, or form, but look for the nose pointing up. That's what's going to make them stand out. Okay. They can be up to 4 feet tall, 4 feet long. They've got the upturned snout, and their scales are keeled too. That's another thing. If you wanted to pet them, that's fine. Okay. I have found them in the mountains, even though they're supposed to be not common. Like I said, the one I found was kind of gray and plain, and it was in the process of molting, so it couldn't see very well. But we still enjoyed putting on some gloves and handling a little bit. And I have already talked about their behaviors. Okay, they are toad eaters, but they don't necessarily have to be tied to water because of this, because toads are not tied to water. Okay, so I found them in an upland grassland area where an old homestead used to be. All right, our next one actually is tied to water, and it is called a water snake. So that kind of fits, right? Every time I've seen these, it's been either in water or at bridges or someplace really close to water. Okay, they're another one that has patterns to them, but they don't have any of the other solid black coloration that our eastern rat snake have, or our black racer. So as adults, they have a clear pattern to them, and they also have that pattern as juveniles as well. Okay, so those things kind of stand out. They always have that pattern. They sometimes get confused with copperheads, but I'm going to walk you through how clearly they don't. A lot of people just think, oh, it's got a pattern, it must be a copperhead. It is not. One of the things to notice, especially the one on the bottom shows it really well, is that they've got banding of dark and light and dark and light, but it's not like zebra stripes where it's up and down. They actually look like almost like little Hershey's Kisses. Okay, they look more like this because I'm really bad at drawing. But you can see the yellow spotting down there towards the front of the head. Looks like a Hershey's Kiss, but it's not brown. It is yellow. All right. Copperheads have Hershey's Kisses as well, but the Hershey's Kisses on copperheads are brown. These guys are never brown. It's always the opposite. If there's Hershey's Kisses, they're upside down going through. So you can see the brown that kind of looks like upside down Hershey's Kisses on them. But when they do have patterns along their sides, for the water snakes, it's going to be the lighter color. Okay. And that's one of the ways to separate them out. And they're always tied to water. Copperheads, hardly ever. Okay. They don't get that big, up to 4 feet, maybe. They can be a lot of different colors, but they always have that blotching. They tend to be grayer with age, but you can always see that blotching. You'll see the blotching on the belly as well. Okay. You'll have very strongly keeled scales versus the rat snake, which had weakly keeled. So you'll definitely see and feel it. Okay. Like I said, oops, I spelled lakes wrong. And they can be, I hate to say aggressive, because it's only when they're threatened, they're protecting themselves. They are able to bite. Okay. Yeah. So leave them alone if you see them in or near the water. They're doing no harm. They mostly eat fish, and they're pretty useful to have around. And this is another one where I will take either water snake as one word or water space snake, but just make sure you always precede it with the word northern. So northern water snake or northern space water space snake. Okay, that's Nerodia sipidon. Sometimes you'll see them as Natrix sipidon, which Natrix means associated with water. But anyway, that's an old word that you might see on some older jars and stuff like that. But I think all of ours are updated correctly. Okay, here's one that's kind of fun. And everybody, well, I wouldn't say everybody, but hopefully most of you have seen at least one of these in your life. This is an Eastern garter snake. Now it's Garter, not gardener, even though they can be found near gardens. Okay, garter, Garter. And this one is always going to have a yellow stripe going down its back. Okay, so it will have a clear yellow stripe. And then it's either going to have 2 darker rows on either side that are solid or are slightly blotched. And I gave you 2 examples. One that is solid dark, that is kind of just outside that yellow line, and one that is more blotchy. These are going to be much smaller than any of the other snakes that we've dealt with, except for those ringneck snakes. They will eat just about anything, and they are found often around human habitation. They also stink to high heavens and release a terribly horrible musky smell when you pick them up that I can tell you from personal experience does not get off your hands very easy. Okay, this is Thamnophis sertalis, and you're looking for that light stripe going down the back. That is always going to be preserved in our specimens too. They can be greenish, they can be brownish, but they're always going to have that light stripe going down the back with 2 darker stripes on either side of that. Okay, they also have keeled scales for what it's worth. They're always going to be around human habitation, anywhere there's adequate cover. I have flipped over cornhole boards that I've left out for a week and have found a full-size garter snake there. So we named him George, and I hope to see him again sometime. Sometimes I feel like I should just put out the cornhole boards just so I can see my snakes again. Okay. And then, like I said, they smell really, really bad, and they will release the musk on your hands. So they make themselves essentially distasteful, so you don't want to eat them. So that is Thamnophis sertalis. All right, we're going to talk about the 3 that are venomous. Okay. Remember, venomous means they have to bite you to kill you or get you hurt. Poisonous means you have to eat them to get sick. And everything, like I said, is considered a copperhead around here. If it's not a solid color, it's a copperhead, right? Look at the head compared to everything else that we've seen so far. It looks really different, right? And it's because it does have a triangle shaped head, which is one thing that does make it stand out. The downside in saying anything with a triangle shaped head is venomous is that that's not always true, is that there are a lot of non-venomous species that can mimic that. We talked about the hognose being able to do that. Black rat snakes or eastern rat snakes can do that too. They can flatten out their head to make it look like they are triangular shaped. They are mimicking these venomous snakes. So just because it's triangle shaped, you can't say, oh, it's venomous. Just because it's patterned, you can't say, oh, it's venomous. The one good side is that if it doesn't have a pattern on it, there's a 99.9% chance that it is not venomous, if that helps. There are a couple of what are called aberrant colorations, color morphs, where they have found an occasional copperhead that is missing its pattern of this of these dark and light bands. Okay, this is the one with the Hershey's Kisses, my little prop here, and it's not a very good picture here, but I'll show you some better pictures. But if you're looking at them from the side, those bands get narrower as you go up towards the back of the snake, and they look like literal Hershey's Kisses. So think about the dark chocolate is the brown. Remember, in the water snake, their head looks totally different, and the banding part is upside down, with the Hershey's Kisses being upside down on a northern water snake. Okay, with these guys, the Hershey's Kisses you're looking at them as if they are an actual Hershey's Kiss. They also have pits. They're called pit vipers. This whole family is Viperidae, and they have pits right behind their noses and between their eyes. From their eyes to their nose, there's another little hole, essentially, that also stands out too. And these guys are cool because in some light conditions, as long as it's not super low light, because they'll get wide open, their pupils will be vertical. Okay. Under low light conditions, that will not look like that. They'll look normal. Okay. But high light conditions like this picture here, they're going to get like cat's eyes. Okay. Here's a better picture showing you the little Hershey's Kiss. So it looks obvious, where you've got the banding gets narrow towards their back. Okay. Kind of think of it like if you continued that whole dark band, they look like dumbbells. Does that help? So maybe dumbbell shape if you look across the entire portion of their back. But if you're just looking at one side, it's going to look like Hershey's Kisses, okay, that come together. You can clearly see the vertical slit for their eyes, the vertical pupils, and you can also see that triangle shaped pit that is right around there. Just to show you the difference between water snakes and copperheads, okay, you can see the opposite banding patterns, dark versus light, are completely opposite, and their heads look nothing alike. They also are not found in the same habitats, water versus very rarely water. Okay, so our copperhead is one of our venomous ones. Look for the pits, look for the Hershey's Kisses. I also explain them as dumbbells if you go along the whole side. Okay, they do have scales that are keeled, but I wouldn't pet them to find that out. They're definitely the most common one in this area. They're the ones that I run into most often, but a lot of times you're going to walk right by them and nobody is ever going to notice, because they don't run, they don't make their presence known, they don't reach out and strike you. Unless you are literally stepping on them, they want to go the other way. And I have stepped over them on rocks multiple times, crossing an area for wood rats, and not until 10 minutes of walking back and forth did they slither out and leave and me even know that they were there. It's pretty crazy. Okay. But anyway, they will hang out around here. And the only time you have to worry about them is when they are molting, because again, their eyes get glossed over. They can't see very well. They're more likely to strike. That's about the only time that they'll stay put for a while. Even if you see them in your yard, they're just going to head someplace else very, very quickly. Okay. Oh, and they're live bearers, which is kind of neat. One of the few. All right, our next one is our cottonmouth. Okay. And it's because when they open their mouths, it looks like there is white or cotton, like their mouth is just loaded with cotton. Okay. What makes them stand out is they have raccoon bands across their eyes. And you can see that very clearly in the picture to the upper left, where they've got that banded pattern there going straight across their eyes. That really makes them stand out. All three of our venomous species are pit vipers, by the way. So you will, with these guys, it's harder to see the pit, which is why I don't really point them out so much. But these ones are tied to water. They're called water moccasins or cottonmouths. I will accept either one. Okay. It's the same species, just two different common names. You don't have to give me both. You can just choose one and go for it. Okay. The banding on them sometimes looks a lot like a copperhead, except everything is jagged. Okay, so instead of a smooth Hershey's Kiss, it's a jagged Hershey's Kiss. And I think I got some additional pictures here to show you. So here's an example of one from the Herp Society that shows you that it still has those Hershey's Kisses on the side, maybe brownish Hershey's Kisses, but it's jagged on the edge. Okay. And you can weakly see the banding across their face. They also have a very flat face. Okay. So the bands are kind of just on the side of their very, very flat face. The other thing is they're not here. All right. Anybody says they've seen a cottonmouth in Radford or on the Little River? No, they saw a northern water snake. Okay. They do not exist here. Here's the most recent, most updated map of where they're at. They're nowhere near here. Okay. So where they are present, they can be plentiful. When I worked in Oklahoma, I took a herpetology class, and we were stepping across cottonmouth after cottonmouth as we walked through a small stream one night. And boy, there were at least a dozen of them in 10 feet. And boy, it was really, really intimidating. So don't do that. Okay. But here they are completely absent in Radford. I just wanted to show you that they do exist in Virginia if you are from one of the coastal areas. Okay. So they are venomous, water moccasin or cottonmouth. They have pits as well. They're supposed to have elliptical pupils, not as visible as far as I can tell. They have the jagged Hershey's Kisses and some sort of crossbands, like I said, keeled scales, and they're always going to be associated with anything aquatic. Okay, so they are not here. Their scientific name is Agkistrodon piscivorus, okay, meaning they are fish eaters. Piscivore, okay, is a fish eater. I probably forgot the copperhead. That's Agkistrodon contortrix. Okay. All right, and our last one, which is here, is our timber rattlesnake. Rattlesnake is always one word, by the way. And not that you can always see the rattle, but if you see it, you've definitely got this species because it's the only one here. There are eastern diamondbacks that are farther south and farther west, but timbers are the only ones that are here in Virginia. So if you see something with a rattle, it's this guy. Okay. They have usually a light colored body, but it could be either yellow, anywhere from a bright yellow to a dark brown. And if they are dark brown, those black bands going across them are not quite as obvious. And I have seen some really dark morphed ones over the years, but the bands are still there. And I'm always looking for that rattle. When they grow, they essentially will grow a rattle every time. I think it's every time they shed, every time they molt. So snakes, as they grow, are going to be shedding a lot early in their lives, and then reduced amounts because they're not growing as fast later in their lives. So you can count the number of rattles and kind of estimate how old they are, but it's not one rattle is a year. It's just a relative scale. And those rattles can also break off in an unpredictable manner, and they can still live without them. So just because it only has a couple rattles, it may have lost those. but seeing something with 8 or 10 rattles is usually a mature, pretty impressive rattlesnake. Okay. And I have seen quite a few of these in my time as well, including this summer. But they're sit and wait predators as well. So unless you really mess with them, they're going to leave you alone. So don't mess with them. They are venomous. Okay. So they can be yellow, they can be brown. Look for the cross bands, which are much more evident if they are yellow. Okay, but if they are a darker color, there are nearly solid black dark morphs of rattlesnakes, of the timber rattlers, which is why you do have to worry about like black rat snakes being confused for these guys because they can be pretty dark. But you're looking for the rattle on the tail for sure. And they're going to be kind of, I don't know, blockier or bulkier than a rat snake would be in any case. Okay, they're just big boys. Okay, they may not grow quite as fast or quite as long as like an eastern rat snake, but they're definitely got some bulk to them. Okay, they're going to be in rocky areas. I've seen them crossing my old road in from one forest area to another. They do like to live in rock outcrops with my wood rats, so they are a predator of wood rats. But sometimes the wood rats will take them on and win. So it's kind of exciting that, you know, even timber rattlesnakes can lose sometimes. Okay. When they are discovered, they're going to be real quiet and calm. I was able to get within a few feet. I wasn't getting any closer of one this summer that was just chilling underneath a rock and taking its picture and stuff. As long as you're not threatening it, it's not going to do anything. So just leave it be. I've seen them hiking before. Not them hiking, me hiking. And, you know, if you give them, we say admire them from a distance is kind of what you do for anything that can be harmful if you were to try and pet the cute little rattlesnake. So that's Crotalus horridus. Okay, we are almost done. So we are getting to our lizards now. And we've got a couple that I'm just going to do, a couple representative ones. The first one is the eastern fence lizard. And I think I introduced this in lecture the other day, is that because they are known to, you know, hang out and sun themselves and bask on fences. That's kind of where they're found, in maybe fence rows, young forest areas, hedgerows, kind of early successional shrubby areas. They like to get out and bask. So you will see them hanging out once in a while. They're called Scoloporus undulatus because it's undulated on the back. You can see they've got those wavy lines going across multiple areas on the back. And you can see the picture maybe towards the bottom left that as they get older, they kind of lose the really contrasting light versus dark, but that pattern is always there. And the adult males, when they are in breeding condition, are going to have that blue coloration, mostly visible on their neck, occasionally visible on their belly. Okay, so, and that's a temporary thing. They also have a lot of kind of serrations that it looks like on their back. I almost see like they've got almost 2 lines on their back before it juts down towards their sides. That just really stands out. And they feel real sharp, like you're not going to cut yourself, but it's not soft. You can definitely feel that they are just scaly. Okay. And you can even see the scales on that top picture kind of around their neck, that the serrations really stand out. Okay. And they're from head to tail, they're only maybe 3 inches long, and then double that for their body, for their tail to include that as well. So yeah, about 6 inches or so is about right. I already pointed out, just look for those undulating streaks across their back, and they're going to be brown or gray. And like I said, they lose that coloration when they get a little older. Those scales are considered keeled. So like I said, this thing is not soft looking at all. I already mentioned the blue when they're in breeding condition. and they're going to be just anywhere that they can bask and where there's still a lot of cover for them to dive down. Okay, that's Scoloporus undulatus. This one is not actually in our part of Virginia. This is the green anole, Anolis carolinensis, but this is something that you can get at any of the local pet stores. They're really, really fast moving. They can drop their tails and still live to talk about it. They've got these dewlaps, DEWLAP, that they can extend, like in the picture to the left, and use that for mating enticement. Those are the males that are doing that to talk to the females. And usually the pattern of how they pulse that dewlap and whether they do push-ups, they can basically recognize members of their own species by doing the exact same behaviors back at each other. They can also be brown, so they are changing color depending on the type of habitat that they're in. These are called green anoles, but just as often they can be brown. A lot of times they're going to have a white stripe going down their back, and that should still be visible even in our preserved specimens. Okay, so they're arboreal. They're well adapted to suburban living farther south. Like I said, they can change from green to dark brown. They have chromatophores that are similar to those that are found in amphibians. And in order to form green, you have to have the chromatophores for yellow. Remember, you do need the pigments for that. And then you would need the chromatophores that can refract the light to make it blue. So you're having yellow pigments plus the blue refraction gives you everything that's green. Okay. These are super common in the far southeastern United States, but they're not in Virginia. They get pretty close, but apparently not here unless they are like a pet release. So Anolis carolinensis. Okay. This is the one that everybody seems to call a blue-tailed skink. Okay, realize blue-tailed skinks do not exist as a species in and of themselves. Juvenile skinks have blue tails, and they have it instead of being camouflaged. They have that blue tail standing out, very visible. So predators, if they do go for the skinks, are going to go for the tail. They can drop their tail. You can see the picture to the bottom right. That dude is actually missing its tail, even though it's an adult. They can survive without it, and they can grow basically a skinnier, weaker version of it again. But the blue on the tail is to get predators to aim for that instead. Okay, they start off as juveniles as real bright, shiny colors. These are called 5-line skinks because they have 5 lines, and that includes dark and light lines across their back. Okay, and then as they mature, this is a mature male on the bottom right because it is in breeding coloration. It's face turned red. But again, they will lose that outside of their breeding season. But you can still see that it does have 5 lines going across its back. They're just weaker and not as obvious when they're adults. They kind of dull that coloration. There's actually a couple species of these skinks that are in our area. We actually have 3. For what it's worth, the fathead skink looks a lot like the one to the bottom right and has a fatter head. And then there's one more skink, Plestiodon inexpectatus, where all you're doing is you're counting the number of scales underneath their, like right at their lips. So trying to actually identify what species of skink you have is really hard to do unless you've got an awesome camera or you're literally holding the animal, because the other skink that I was mentioning, you also have to look at its underside scale pattern too, as well as the scales around the lips. So they can tell themselves apart from each other. Sometimes we can't, but these are all skinks. The one you have to learn is the 5-line skink, and that's Plestiodon fasciatus. Okay, Plestiodon is the genus now. They changed that a couple of years back. All right, So look for the 5 stripes. Juveniles have blue tails. Breeding males have the red heads. And these guys are around human habitation too. We used to find them in our window well all the time, and I would scoop them out and give them a second life again. Okay, so lots of good stuff. They're good at basking. They will use a lot of the same areas as fence lizards. Okay, so lots of cool things. We do have them on campus too. So if you see any skinks on campus, we found them as a new county record. They're around the library, and they're between the library and Chubbs, and they're also in the alumni gardens. So there's a couple of populations that are moving across those like 2 to 3 buildings essentially, and that's where they live entirely on campus. So if you see anything with lines on it on campus, that is not a skunk, it's a skink. See, skunk, skink. All right, here's our teeniest of tiniest little guys. These are called ground skinks. Look how big they are. I mean, even when they are big, they're teeny tiny. Okay, so they're super, super small. And what you're looking for are the 2 kind of lateral lines. They're just maybe on the edge of the dorsal sides. Maybe not fully lateral, but definitely 2 dark bands with nothing in the middle. So even in the preserved specimens, there's no spotting, no splotching or anything, just those 2 really dark bands and a teeny tiny little dude along the whole way. Okay, so very small. Ground skinks are here, just usually like 3 inches total body length. Okay, a very non-remarkable critter. And I include them just because they're really close. And if you ever do see them in Montgomery County or Radford City or anywhere in the like Pulaski County, Dublin, places like that, it would be considered a new county record. They're so close. We know they've got to be here. We just haven't found them yet. Okay, so here's a picture or a map from the Virginia Herpetological Society. So it shows that they are, there we are right there. That's Radford, Montgomery County, and Roanoke. So all of those places haven't yet documented them, but gosh, they're really, really close. So if you find them, let me know. Okay, and that is Skinkella lateralis. Oh yeah, I did put that there. Skinkella lateralis, lateral lines. Okay, it basically means little skink with lateral lines. Okay. All right, we are almost there. We've got our 6-lined race runner to go, who is another one who is not necessarily here in Radford, but sort of close. These guys, even as adults, are going to have the 6 visible lines that will be there. And in this case, the lines that they're counting, I think, are just the yellow lines. And they're counting either edge of here as yellow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, no, they're not. 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6. So I think they're ignoring this one. Okay, but it looks like 3 yellow on one side, 3 yellow on the other side. I always forget that because we don't see them very often. And their face looks pretty different. They look more like an iguana from the side, if you see this picture, compared to our skinks. The only thing you might get them confused with are 5-line skinks, because you got 5 versus 6 lines. These guys do not have the whole series of kind of shiny scales around their mouths. These guys are dull and dinosaur-y. Kind of looks like a old iguana or dinosaur. These look like kind of the old man of the lizards around here. They also have the ability to drop their tails. Look how long these tails are. Okay, so this is Aspidoscelis sexlineata. Sexlineata actually means 6-lined. Okay, so they are super long tails. Okay, compared to our skinks, they do not have super long tails. Maybe skinks have equal body and tail length. Okay, these guys are a time and a half of the body. Okay, so you've got the stripes running down. The belly can be different colors but really in our specimens, you're not going to see that difference. Okay. They are in Virginia, but not here. Okay. They're not in Western Virginia at all. But if you live towards the coast, you have these as well. Okay. Aspidoscelis sexliniana. And our last one, an alligator. Okay. Alligator Mississippiensis. Must I actually define what an alligator looks like? It looks like an alligator. Okay. The young ones, just like the snakes, are banded for camouflage. The older ones lose the banding. Okay. So alligators should not be here. It's much too cold for them to survive the winter, at least in light of climate change. That could change over the next 100 years. But for now, I think the closest known populations are like the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And even then, not a whole lot of them. Okay. So alligators are kind of on their own. American alligators, where they have up to 20 feet long, and they can be over 700 pounds. I mentioned the juveniles having stripes across their back. Obviously, they're very, very large. Apparently, they did get as far historically as the Dismal Swamp, which is the southeastern corner of Virginia. They're not there now. Okay, now, like I said, Outer Banks of North Carolina are as close as they come. Alligators versus crocodiles. We don't have crocodiles anywhere near here. They're going to be Florida. And of course, how do you tell an alligator from a crocodile? With an alligator, you'll see them later. With a crocodile, you'll see them in a while. And on that, I think we're done. Have a good day, and I hope this helped.